It would be interesting to hear that, you're 12 years, 12, 13 years at Silicon Valley, shipping enterprise software and consumer technology. You've seen speed, culture, you've seen crazy scale, right? Like, so are there any parallels that you are seeing now develop in the Indian ecosystem as well, which were prevalent then? Or were there any significant learnings that you still think are white spaces in the Indian ecosystem and we still have a way to go? Maybe we could spend a bit of time to that and then go on to the building 1mg journey and your learnings from there.
Yeah. No, the great question again. I think, one of the biggest sort of thing that I learned back in the Bay Area was that, we were always told to hack things together, right? If you look at the Indian, I don't want to call it culture because it may offend folks, but if you look at our learning system, it basically says, do the minimum required, hack something together. Now, how that has become a part of our cultural parlance, I don't know, right? But that's what we were taught, right? You look at what we did in school, look at what we did in college, assignments, min work required, right? There was very little drive for excellence, right? And there was even lesser drive for self-induced excellence, right? We didn't excel, right? When I submitted assignments, it was very common to copy here and there. And in fact, I remember back in one of my IIT courses, one of our professors gave an assignment. Of course, there was widespread plagiarism, right? A computer science programming assignment. This guy was smart. He basically went to Berkeley, took a plagiarism tool, found that on average, an assignment was copied 5 times. So he found all the assignments, all the copiers of that assignment, basically divided the grades into the number of times your assignment was copied. So if it was a 10-pointer assignment, copied 10 times, you got 1 point each, right? Now go chill, right? And I think if you ask me, that was one of the biggest lessons I learned, that if no one is looking, would you shoot for excellence, or would you do the minimum stuff required, right? That was, I think, one of the biggest lessons for me. And I learned it over many, many years in many, many hard ways, right? Where people would point out that, you did not do the right thing. I think that was one big lesson, which I still feel is not as prevalent as it should be in the ecosystem, right? I think the second big lesson I learned was there's a difference between planning and execution, right? Sort of tied to the first step, but in the Silicon Valley, we always planned for extreme, okay? What is the peak demand that you can get, right? Can your system handle peak demand? Okay, in India, we always plan for, let's make it work tomorrow, right? And if you look around yourself, it shows everywhere. It shows in our infrastructure. It shows in roads, infrastructure. It shows in the technology we built. It shows, honestly, in a lot of ways in what we have done at 1mg, right? Meaning some of the things that we have done are not built for scale, right? And we learn the lessons the hard way, right? And some of it was that the Silicon Valley system, the culture actually forced this mindset, right? Where before I built something, I was meant or made to prove why it would meet the requirements that were laid out rather than just go build it, right? And that conversation was just exciting. So I think that's another thing that's missing. I think the third thing that's missing is just, from a work culture perspective, it was a much more, I would say, responsible work culture and a much more entrepreneurial work culture, right? I feel, when you say the argumentative Indian or the complaining Indian, right? It's a reality, right? We tend to, and I see this across the board. The number of people who are willing to take steps to change how things are is very few compared to the number of folks, excruciatingly small compared to the number of folks who are willing to complain about it, right? And one of my enduring beliefs after working in India for now 7 years is that we tend to change the context more easy than we tend to fix the context, right? So let me explain. If something in a company is not working well, what we will do is we will say, let me find another job, right? We will not stand up and say, that I will actually use my influence and my power to fix things,
Hmm.
right? And I think that was a huge difference, hugely different in the Valley, where everyone felt such a level of ownership and participation, which, has been very, very hard for us to meet. And even for me, I work with, I think, a really awesome team, but even then, it's nothing compared to what we had in the Valley.
Right. I think so many of all of those pointers, in fact, are so thoughtful in nature, especially the first one. I think just that striving for excellence, sort of a mentality in the absence of others as well, and not being induced to do that, but having that natural trait is so important. I feel. I think that's amazing, Gaurav. I think thanks for sharing those pointers. That's definitely food for thought for everyone listening in. Just as a follow on to that, like a quick one, but what's the difference in terms of the working style? Like, is it drastically different in terms of what we see in terms of pulling off those hard hours, the hustle culture that we motivate, and things like that we typically idolize or really propagate? Like, is that the right way? Because we'll always see those contrarian perspectives as well, where somebody will say that this is not how it's supposed to be, because given the founder
Yeah.
journey, again, it's so difficult. Why would you want to like work 18-20 hours a day, drain yourself? Like, how have you seen those parallels play out in the real world?
Yeah, to be very honest, I feel the Silicon Valley work-life balance was at least better when I was there, right? And I think that um, I feel that one of the other big learnings was that people actually had interests other than just work, right?
Hmm.
I know so many of my friends who were um, let's say into music, right, would play an instrument. हम तो, we were idiot. हम तो कुछ ना सीखे बड़े होते हुए, just किताब पढ़ ली, and right, and we've tried to change that, but people actually had real interest, right? They had real interest. They were doing things because they cared about those things, right? And I feel because of that, even in startups, I think the work-life balance was better. I think the social pressure, maybe of success and failure, was also a little less, right? And look, I think um, it's also very different, right? Because uh, today there's a lot more media pressure on startups, right? Uh, there's a lot more sort of need to characterize success and failure, right? And success is your unicorn, your large raises. Failure is, I honestly feel that every failed startup is even more important than every successful one, right? Because failed startups are, the founders are building core infrastructures that at some point will get scaled up, right? So I feel that from that perspective, the pressures in India maybe today, and I can't speak for Silicon Valley, I'm sure there are pressures there as well. They are different. Um, there's a lot of just social pressure, right? There's too
Right.
much media and too much success, failure, etc. But overall, I think it's okay.